Now more than ever, innovative technologies are fueling change and sparking new ways of thinking. Collaboration between corporations and startups is key to staying at the forefront of these trends. However, finding the right startups can be expensive, time-consuming, and ineffective. But Plug and Play is here to help. As a corporate partner, you will gain access to a whole ecosystem of innovation. Discover startups that meet your tech interests. Stay updated on the latest trends and network with industry peers. We will help you during every stage of your innovation journey, no matter where you are and where you want to go. Get in touch today.
Our very first innovation day that we're hosting together with DXC Technologies in Belgium on accelerating the digital energy transition. My name is Eliq, and I work for Plug and Play on the ventures team, and I will be your moderator for today. We're hosting this event live out of the Port House in Antwerp, which we have an in-person audience of around 50 people, and we also have a large virtual audience joining us today. So thank you again for joining us, and we hope we can inspire you today with the great content we got lined up for you. We got some amazing keynotes, but also some very inspiring startup pitches lined up for you. First of all, I would like to introduce you to some of the people who made this possible today. Therefore, I would like to invite Alexis and Peter to the stage from DXC Technology. Peter is the managing director of DXC Technology in Belgium and Luxembourg, and Alexis is consulting partner at DXC. So please, guys, come to the stage.
Good afternoon, everybody, and I'm very excited and happy to be here with you in this beautiful location in the Port of Antwerp. I want to thank the City of Antwerp and the Port of Antwerp for having us here. It's really a pleasure. 2,500 years ago, there was a Greek philosopher who said, change is the only constant. And if you look into the world around us, if you look at what's happening with climate, which is pushing us to think about the way we live, the way we produce, if you think about what's happening with scarcity of resources, which drives circular economies, which didn't exist a while ago, if you think about what's happened the last 2 years with the COVID pandemic and how we rethink how we work and where we work. And then the last few months, if you see what's happening with the war here in Europe, something that never should have happened and we didn't believe it would happen, but it's also pushing the way we think about our energy supplies. So the world is constantly changing. And that's the world where DXC wants to play in. We want to help our clients go through these transformations throughout the entire IT stack, through support in infrastructure, in application building and maintenance, in analytics, in consulting. This is where we think we should help our clients.
And also that's why a year ago we decided to partner with Plug and Play around supply chain and maritime. One of the sectors that is, according to us, going to be completely disrupted by digital and other trends. That's why we partnered with Plug and Play. Today, the event around energy transition, I think it's obvious for most of the people in the room and on the streaming. Yeah, also one of the sectors confronted with huge challenges. Disruption is there, and we need to rethink the way we look at things. That's why, again, we invited a number of startups just to inspire you, to have the discussion ongoing, and to feed you with new ideas.
So, welcome here again. We're looking forward to discuss with all of you a number of trends and solutions and challenges that we see in the market. And I'm looking forward to learn with you this afternoon.
Thank you, Peter and Alexis. Before walking you through the agenda of today, I would first like to introduce you also to our director, David Neef. David is overseeing all activities of Plug and Play in the Benelux area. So he's the ideal person to tell you a little bit more about Plug and Play, what we're doing on a daily basis. So, here, David.
Thank you so much, Cedric. Hi, everyone. Also, on behalf of Plug and Play, we'd like to thank, of course, DXC for co-hosting this Innovation Day with us. Also to the board for hosting us in this beautiful location. I have the pleasure to guide you a little bit in a couple of minutes to what Plug and Play is all about, what we do. I think the clicker is here. Amazing. And I think some of you or most of you know Plug and Play, what we do and what we are about. But for the ones who are hearing this for the first time, Plug and Play is a very small company. We're headquartered in Sunnyvale, California. And we basically started with being at the right time, at the right place, and investing in early stage technology companies. Companies we invested in this house, we invested in companies like Google, PayPal, or Dropbox, so very famous and big companies. And this was the birthplace of Plug and Play. So what we do, we are basically a moderator, a facilitator of ecosystems. Main stakeholders are startups and corporations, but also we have governments, we have mentors, universities in our network, and we also try to bring them together and to make meaningful engagements with each other. We always like to say, if you're getting asked what is Plug and Play actually doing, we always like to show this slide. We have three main pillars, three main activities. On the left-hand side, we run our innovation platforms like Plug and Play Maritime here in Antwerp, but also we do this globally in 40 other locations, and we run 60 industry-specific platforms. We help large corporations along their innovation efforts. So we help them from ideation, inspiration, really up to finding technologies and implementing them into their products, services, or processes. So that's what we call the corporate innovation pillar. And the right pillar is our venture capital activities. Measured by the number of investments, Plug and Play is one of the most active venture capital companies in the world. We do 200 investments a year, but very small investments. So we invest $100,000, $200,000, $300,000. But we basically do a lot of them. And also on a global scale, we recently started our European Investment Council, and we, for example, last week announced our first investment into an Antwerp-based company. To give you an overview where Plug and Play is located, why do we have so many offices? We like to collaborate with our corporate partners where they are, where they have their R&D, where they have the headquarters. And this is how we basically started to grow from Silicon Valley into the world and opened up new offices, always next to our corporate partners' headquarters. And this is also how we ended up here in Antwerp. And over the past, we also have a strong USP because we can help corporations on a global scale, but we can also help startups on a global scale, for example, to get access into new markets or to also source capital from other regions of the world. What you see here, we try to cluster our activities, 18 industry-specific programs. So we have really activities tailored on maritime, programs tailored on healthcare, on fintech. We have a very, very long-lasting relationship with DXC, for example, in our mobility and enterprise activities back in Germany. And the Plug and Play Maritime is our newest additions. And before I finish my presentation, I'll give you a quick snapshot on that as well. So we started here in Antwerp last year, 2021. We had our first event in October with our kickoff. And we are currently running our very first batch. So we have a total of 9 startups in the batch. You see 1 or 2 of them also pitching today. And we have an amazing round of what we call founding partners, including DXC, including the Port of Antwerp, the City of Antwerp, but also companies like Euronav and CMB. And we're also very excited to announce that the platform is growing. In our upcoming event, we're also announcing 2 new corporate partners who are joining the initiative. And to give just an idea, what is Plug and Play Maritime all about? A long list of different search fields, interest areas, and focus areas. So we focus on topics like smart shipping, sustainability, supply chain, obviously. So also the topic of today is a great fit because we also want to look a little bit beyond and adjacent to the topics we are having here. And with that, that was a super quick snapshot into Plug and Play. I would like to invite you all to our very first Expo Day, which is happening in less than 4 weeks. So June 2nd is the big day. If you're interested to join us, feel free to reach out to me or to my colleagues. And with that, handing it over back to Cedric. Thank you so much.
Thank you, David. So Now I would like to give you a little more insight on today's agenda. We will kick it off with our first keynote, which will handle on the classical findings regarding carbon neutrality. Next, we will introduce two startups to you that are active in the field of energy management and analytics. Then we go ahead with our second keynote, which handles about the unexpected impacts of achieving carbon neutrality. Again, we're going to introduce two startups to you who are active in the fields of digital grid management. We have a little 20-minute break, and then we come back to you with our third keynote, which handles on how digital solutions can break the wall to achieving carbon neutrality. This will again be followed by two startup talks by Eliq and Bleenco, and then to finish things off, we got a special guest invited as well today, Boyle from the data utility company. Is going to give you also a little bit more insight on the recently started initiative. So let's kick it off by introducing the main keynote speaker of today, Francois Dauphin. Francois is DXC's leading expert in energy and utility solutions and has spent the last 30 years of his career on advising numerous governments and corporations on making the energy business more sustainable and more green. Over the years, he has published multiple articles and opinion pieces on the future of electricity generation and distribution, and is a well-respected thought leader in the industry. When Francois is not advising or writing on all of these topics, he loves to go for water skiing or cycling with his daughter. So without further ado, Francois, please give him a warm applause.
Thank you, Cedric, to give me the opportunity to talk to you and make those representation. So the first slot is going to be towards which are the classical findings and when we look at pure carbon neutrality. So these are things you probably already read, but I am going to highlight this and highlight the key messages you need to remind when we talk about carbon neutrality. So to do so, I'm going to refer to three surveys, principally one which is a survey published 6 months ago by RT, the French grid operator, looking at how we could be carbon neutral. And I'm going to pick up some elements from this survey, but I'm also going to refer to a survey which has been published by Eliq in Belgium, and also a survey which recently, 2 weeks ago, has been published by the University of Leuven. And all those surveys are less than 6 months old, so they are new surveys. So carbon neutrality, what does it mean? In RT surveys, you have got here an estimation on how the energy mix is today and how it will look like in the future. You have to mention here two elements, which are important elements. I did publish my own energy mix some 20 years ago. And the first conclusion is, unless we decouple our energy production and consumption from the economical growth, we cannot be carbon neutral. And the first conclusion of our RT survey is exactly the same. We will have to decouple energy consumption from our economical growth. Otherwise, we cannot sort it out. So it's important to remind this. Here we are talking about reducing the final consumption by 40% in 30 years. Which means that we need, in absolute terms, to reduce by 1.3% our consumption every year. Well, for most of you, 1.3% doesn't seem necessarily enormous, so I'm going to give you some forecast. In 3 years, it means that, roughly speaking, you are going to reduce your consumption by 5%. This is the equivalent of one COVID. 2020, we have got minus 5% reduction of the energy consumption, final consumption in France. So we need to have in final consumption the equivalent of one COVID every 3 years without any rebound effect. Enormous. Another forecast, in 2050, with this rate, we will have in final energy consumption the equivalent of what we had in the 60s last century. The amount of energy that my grandfather used to have. That's our challenge. That's the first thing you need to remind. Second thing you see here is that even though the final consumption is going to go down, because we are going to electrify a lot of final usage, electricity consumption is going to go up. It's counterintuitive, but that's the reality. So we'll have less global consumption because we suppress completely the consumption of oil and gas, but we'll have more electricity consumption. In the case of RTE, we have got an increase of 30%. In the case of Elia, it's even more. This is due principally to the fact that in the case of France, they have got some forecasts in terms of increase of biomass production and consumption of 50%. So the ratio for producing heat is a bit different. And thus, in the case of Belgium, they expect even more increase of electricity consumption. These are the different scenarios. So in the case of RTEs, I have published 6 different scenarios to be carbon neutral. The 3 first one, M0, M1, M23, these are 3 scenarios which are 100% renewable. And they are different based on whether you use rather decentralized production of large park and whether you want to develop it fast or you take up to 2060 to be completely carbon neutral. So depending on the speed and depending on whether it's decentralized or centralized, you will get the scenario M0, 1, or 23. The N1, N2, and N3 scenarios are the 3 scenarios where you get still some nuclear production. N1, you get 2 EPR reactor every 5 years. In the case of N2, you get 2 nuclear reactor EPR every 3 years, with a total of 14, which is what Mr. Macron announced already. And in the case of the scenario N3, you get both EPR and the small modular reactor, which is a new technology for 200 megawatt reactors. What is important to understand here is that whatever the scenarios, and even if the most nucleophile country in the world, which is France, renewable has got the majority of the production. Even in the scenario N3, renewable are producing more than nuclear. In the nuclear scenarios, renewable are between 50 and 74% of the production. Renewable is unescapable. Black and white on the RT report. Renewable is mandatory. So the discussion we have got typically during the last presidential election is a nonsense. We should not discuss this. It is unescapable. So the question is how we put that into practice and we can make it acceptable and financeable. But whether we have to make it or not is undiscutable. I will end up with a couple of conclusions, which is good to understand and also take into consideration. First thing, energy efficiency. So it looks very challenging. We have got 3 pillars to make it happen. The first one is that by design, if we get out of central production and go to decentralized production, we are going to increase our efficiency. The first function of a nuclear plant is to heat birds. 2/3 of the energy produced by a nuclear plant is going in the atmosphere, is not producing electricity. The first function of the oil you put in your car is not going to move the platform on 4 wheels. It is to heat birds. 2/3 of your oil is heating birds, not moving your car. So if we go to decentralized electricity and to electrify the cars, you have got a much better efficiency. So that's the first pillar. Second pillar, of course, is improvement of the technology, improving the technology and improving the efficiency of the building where we are living, where we have a lot of to do. That's the second pillar. And the third pillar, which we understand, we need to understand, and it is clearly mentioned again, black and white on the RT service, we need to change the way we live. 80 terawatt hour, so nearly 15% of our production, is associated with the change of the society. developing teleworking, changing mobility, and changing the way and what people are eating. These can represent up to 15% of the consumption, final consumption. So it's important to understand that there are pillars, we can make it, but we will not make it unless we change also the way we live, as of now. In terms of electricity output, so it has been mentioned that we'll have an evolution. I'm not going to go in depth in this during now. I will come back on the second slot, but we need to have in mind that if we want to get a 100% renewable scenario, like the 3 scenarios which I mentioned initially, whether it's in Belgium or in France, globally speaking, you need to install, in terms of offshore production, as much as what UK did over the last years, in onshore, as much as what Germany did over the last years, and in terms of photovoltaic, 7 times what we did last year. Again, it is not unfeasible, but it is extremely challenging. So many renewables will impact the grid. And within less than 10 years, we'll have to invest in the way we balance the grid, because it is impossible to conserve exactly the same structure and organization rather than the one we have today, because the grid with such an amount of renewables is going to be impacted. Again, I'm going to come back on this on the second slide. In terms of both production and consumption, global warming is happening, and it is happening much faster than what we thought. The last forecast, I've got it 2 weeks ago from France Météo in France. Apparently, France Météo last forecast is that we will reach the 1.5 degree of rise in temperature before 2030. So things are happening, and the first heating wave is now in France within 1 week from now on. So that's happening now, and it is impacting the consumption. Here in the RTE survey, and probably the final figures will be even worse. The consumption for cooling, which is today in France 12 gigawatt during heating waves, in 2050 will have nearly the double, 24 gigawatt. A third of the totality of consumption during heating wave in France. So that's big. So the consumption is heavily impacted. And on the production side also, we are going to have significant impact on hydro, because ice melting is going to change completely, much faster, much earlier in the season. Because the electricity-wise high voltage will be impacted, and we won't be able to use it as we are using it today, because too hot. And because we'll have less water in the river, the production in summer is going to be impacted. And this is important because in the future, today, the peak of consumption and the difficulty we have to manage the peak of consumption is principally in winter, during cold days. In the future, it's not going to be anymore in the winter, it's going to be in the summer when you have several days without wind. And unfortunately, in summer, we'll have less water in the river and we are going to be impacted. Hence, the advice of RTE to look carefully and where we are going to implement the future nuclear reactor, if any, because if you put those reactors in the Garonne River, south of France, you will not be able to use it during the summer peak. Rather use it near from the seashore, taking into account the fact that the sea level is going to rise. Okay, I will end up with two quick remarks. First one is in terms of, there is a lot of debates around, do we have enough space to put all these elements? In Helia survey, they write the conclusion that in Belgium, because of the concentration of the population, your population, you will have probably to import some of your green production. In France, we don't have this difficulty because our population is less concentrated. But one thing which is similar and the same conclusion in RTE survey and in the survey of University of Leuven, published 2 weeks ago, is that the main problem is not space, the main problem is ore, minerals. we will multiply the need for lithium by 10, we'll double or triple the needs for copper, for nickel, for neodymium, etc. Unless we have an access to the ore setup, and it is a strategical task of our governments to manage it as much as the access to oil and gas today, we won't be able to be independent. So it's extremely important to take into consideration the access to the ore. Final message is that all that seems extremely challenging, but at the very end, if you look at the price of the megawatt hour in the scenarios of RT, globally speaking, we are talking about an increase of the megawatt hour of 15%. So it is manageable. I think it's feasible to get the completely autonomous energy system and completely green energy system while being financially accepted by the final user. It is feasible. So we'll discuss afterwards in the next slot what are the findings of RT survey which are not black and white, which I will put black and white. Thank you very much. Cedric, I give the floor to you.
Thanks, Francois. Thanks a lot, Francois, for these interesting findings, and thanks a lot for reading all those thousands of pages that we don't have to do it. Next up, I would like to introduce you to two startups who are active in the field of energy management. We all know that in order to make better decisions, and especially decisions on complex problems, you need data. But that's only half of the story, because to make optimal decisions, you also need to be able to understand and interpret the data. And that is exactly what both companies that we are going to introduce you to now are solving. I would like to introduce you first to Loic Bar. He's the CEO of Opinum, and he developed a digital platform that managed and leveraged the power of energy data. The company was founded in 2014 and is headquartered in Brussels. So please, Loic, come to the stage.
Thank you very much. Thanks for welcoming me. Thanks, Francois, for the very good introduction to my presentation. Yeah, just a few words about Opinum. Some of you might know the name. We are a software company, impact-driven, and we walk the talk. Each time I go to an event like that, I always mention the way I moved to get here. I come from Luik. I had a meeting in Brussels before, and I took the train to Brussels, then Brussels to Antwerp, and from the station to here, I use an electric scooter, and the good thing about that is Francois, I use a Uber. I think you took 20 minutes, I took 11 minutes. And that's the good thing. Opinum is also part of a bigger group, which is called Itineraries. That you might know, it's a CIS provider, and together we are 400 people working for the utility sector. We are effectively based in Belgium, but we have also offices in the US, in Atlanta. And I was saying the Francois introduction was really good because we see the same trends, obviously, in the energy sector. Three main, what we call mega trends. The first one is obviously the need for renewables, and you might know that we see that also when walking the streets. There is more and more renewable capacity, decentralized energy production, and this will effectively have an impact on the way we manage energy. Electrification is another one, very important. You see, we need to decrease the energy usage, but in electricity, we will increase the way we manage, we use electricity. EV is only one example. With the actual context with Russia and Ukraine and the dependency that we have with oil and gas, we see also that electricity could be, will be a replacement for this kind of energy that will also have impact mainly on grid level, because you will the challenge is not the quantity of energy that we need to produce. The challenge is the management of the peak in demand, and which means that we will need to we cannot invest too much in the grid. Obviously, we cannot change everything. Then we will need to change the way we interact with customers. And obviously, the last one, very important, decarbonization. It's also something that needs to happen, and that will also have an impact on utilities. An impact on two levels. The first one is obviously the way you engage with customers. Let's speak about the customer, about dynamic pricing. What is it? But it will happen. The price depending on the load on the grids. How do you communicate this kind of information to the customer? When is it the good moment to do it? That's very important. And obviously impact on the grid. We already discussed about peak management. We will need to be also more precise in detecting leak in the grid. And the good news about that is the data. We are not about the challenge is not to produce data. The challenge is to use data, because data we start to have them. If we take the example of France, the rollout of smart meters is complete, I think, or almost complete, and there is 40 million smart meters installed. In Belgium is ongoing. Then it's good news. Then we have a lot of data about end usage of energy. There is more and more IoT solution. You already have SCADA system, and there is more and more open data that you can use to help you in your analysis. The thing is, we used to work with a lot of utilities, DSO and power and gas utilities, and we see that most of them they have the data, but in systems which are process driven. Then you collect data to do billing, you collect data to manage your grid. But you don't have, utilities doesn't have a lot of infrastructure to do data-oriented application. And this is where we come at Opinum. We have developed an application, a data hub, which help you to leverage all the data that are siloed in different systems. You can think about an MDM, you can think about a CIS system, an ADMS software, SCADA, IoT sensors. All of this data, they are sitting in your infrastructure, but you don't have any way to, for example, correlate this information to provide new insights. An example, a really simple example is if you want to do leak detection on the electrical grid, you need to have data coming from the ADMS system and the MDM system, and with both combined, then you can do something with it. And it is exactly what we try to solve at Opinum, providing you the building blocks to letting you collect, orchestrate, and enrich your data for many different use cases. It can be to propose new services for your customers. It can be to improve your grid operation. It can be to define new way to sell the energy and new business model. You need this kind of data infrastructure platform to leverage your data into insights. Obviously, insights, it's not an easy step. You might have all your data in a system with analytics capabilities. We see that what is also missing in the market is people, talented people with data science skills. We see more and more utilities engaging and hiring with data scientists, but we wanted also to be the backbone for analytics for utilities by providing a marketplace where you can go and you can search for algorithms that has been developed by third-party companies around the world. For example, you want to do a forecast on your data that are sitting in the data hub. You go to our platform, you say, no, I want to apply a forecast for all my smart meters data, and you say, I want to use tangent rogues as an example, which is an algorithms provider for forecast. You can go to the platform and select them and start orchestrating the processing of your data. We work with both really big companies like Schneider Electric, but also startups that are providing algorithms. And it's a one-stop shop to make your data working for you. And in many different use cases, it can be to do new services like building energy modeling for helping grid user to better manage energy. It can be forecast to forecast, for example, injection of electricity in the grid. It can be leak detection for the water utilities. It can be also forecast of energy pricing. But all the use case that you have right now, there is a solution using the combined data with the marketplace initiative that we have, which is something completely open, which means that if you know, or if you here with Plug and Play, if you have companies that have developed algorithms for the utility sector, it's a good way for them to get access to the market. We have, for example, a company that has developed measure and verification algorithms, and that thanks to our platform being installed at utility level, they can deploy their analytics for more than 300,000 smart meters data, and it benefits also obviously for the utilities. Voilà, this is what I wanted to share with you. I hope it provides you with ideas and insight for the future. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Loic, for inspiring our audience. Yeah, you can give the mic back to one of our colleagues. Thank you. Next up, I would like to introduce you to Olivier Piraux. Olivier Piraux is the CEO of Nexxlab, and Nexxlab is a company that developed a solution that facilitates the real-time interaction between all actors in the energy supply chain. The company was founded in 2018 and is headquartered out of Luxembourg. So please, Olivier, come to the stage.
Thank you, Cédric. Today I'm really happy to be here because I see a lot of faces interested in digital technology and energy transition. And this gives me a lot of energy. And I have also the same feeling when I work in Luxembourg with my team. We are really motivated with energy transition and digital innovation. That's the job that we do on daily basis, and it's provide us a lot of joy. And really thank you, Alexis, for the opportunity that you give us to present Nexxlab. Energy transition will be not easy. Energy transition will be very difficult. As Francois mentioned, it will take a lot of effort. It will require a lot of collaboration. And that's very important that this energy transition stay usable, say simplify for the user. And also for the DSO, it will be complicated. Also for the supplier, it will be complicated. But also for the user, it will be complicated. And at Nexxlab, we have really the ambition to simplify the energy transition. What are our partners? The partners that are involved in our architecture and in our solution are indeed the different players. And the players is the grid operator, the energy service supplier, the OEM, and the business developer, the business company. What we are providing, if we look to the four partners that we have in this energy transition, each partner has its own role. And each partner has its own responsibility. And we want to help each partner to do something right now that help in the long journey of energy transition. The first one is the grid operator, because we believe that at Nexxlab that the grid operator must take the initiative first to push the good sign to the market and to indicate where to do something and to do it really in the good direction. But the DSO will face really strong change also. For the DSO, they are already living with PV, they are already living with increasing of electromobility, they are already facing increasing of heat pump, and at the end, we need to invest, we need to reinforce the grid, we need to make it smarter. But in the meantime, we need to win time, because the energy transition pace that we need to reach will generate a lot of work, a lot of investment, and to win time, we believe at Nexxlab that interaction are really the key element. Interaction between the DSO and the user, interaction between the DSO and the market players. And at Nexxlab, we take this as a foundation. At Opinum, they take the data as a foundation. At Nexxlab, we take interaction as a foundation. And for that, we have developed in 4 years some solution for helping to design the grid, to enable flexibility, to enable near real-time view on the grid, to validate that the assets are correctly deployed and connected to some asset registry. And those solutions have in mind the focus on the quality of the grid. And this quality of the grid for a DSO is voltage. Indeed, they deliver electron, they deliver power and energy, but one measurement of the quality of the delivery of the DSO is the voltage. And we focus our solution to help for that, but in a simple way by interacting with the user. For example, if we introduce dynamic tariff, dynamic grid fee tariff, we can really provide this in a simple way for the user and creating right now an effect on the grid. If we look now for the service supplier, those guys are also under pressure. The big challenge of the energy transition is to get the user aligned with the market volatility. They have a sourcing, and this sourcing is constantly changing, and they need to align the user with their opportunity. And again, at Nexxlab, we believe that interaction with the customer is the key element in this energy transition journey. And for that, also, we have different tools that help, in fact, the supplier to get his customer fleet aligned with his opportunities. And I think for both is an opportunity. And again, it's a complete solution that we have developed based on interaction, based on consent management, where we can really help a supplier to deploy those kind of new required interaction for the energy transition. We have, again, a solution for near real-time interaction, near real-time monitoring, dynamic pricing, evaluation of opportunity of investment, and also dynamic tariff. That's all the solutions that we provide as a module that, as a supplier, as a developer of solution, you can activate one by one on all together in order to really enable those flexibility, those alignment with opportunity of the market and real participating customer. And again, if you are a developer also of a solution, developer of a battery pack, developer of a charger, your battery pack need to be connected to those mechanisms. And Nexxlab will help you also to expose your assets and to use your assets regarding this new mechanism required for the energy transition. That's the solution we have developed in 4 years. This is a modular solution. It's not like SAP, it's a focus suite that we have really sized to interact with the user and the opportunity of the market. And we have at Nexxlab 3 strong foundations, strong targets, and we want to keep this really applied for all the module and the core platforms. That's consent management. Consent management is key if you want to gain the trust of your customer, if you want to gain the trust of the user, if the user must agree to give your data, the user must expose with a clear consent his flexibility, and he can retract these consents at any moment. That for us is very important to expose those kinds of mechanisms end-to-end in the platform. Near real-time, second pillar of our solution, near real-time. Why? Because the value of near real-time interaction is very high. And if we want to make energy transition happen, we need a money flow, we need business, we need business case, and near real-time interaction can be really valorized at high price. And that's for us a key element. Automated interaction are the key element, but automated interaction are very important because you can play with your car, we can play with your wash machine, you can play with some element, but it's very important that at the end we have automated reaction. That's what we have developed at Nexxlab and we put available for the market. And even if you think that if I change my behavior a little bit, it's a very small step. At Nexxlab, we believe that the sum of the small step can lead to big change. And we want to help you to assure this challenge. Thank you very much and stay connected.
Thank you so much, Olivier. So if you want to get in contact with Olivier or Loic, please don't hesitate to reach out. So with that, we have arrived to our second keynote of today. I would like to invite Francois again to the stage, who is going to enlighten us with the unexpected impact of achieving carbon neutrality.
Yeah, so the dark side of the moon. So I am going to put I'm going to be a bit more challenging during this second slot in regards of the surveys that I mentioned before, and to put a bit of emphasis on different elements, which I think would have been worth mentioning, typically in the case of RT survey, which I think is not mentioned at all or not necessarily easily mentioned. So I would like to make it a bit more clear. First thing, so we're going to talk about money. I think it's Mr. Pouyanné from the Chief Executive Officer of Total. He said some 3 or 4 months ago that we would be liar if we let people believe that renewables are going to be free. And he's right. It's not going to be free. But you can take my quote, which is a bit different, is that we would be liar if we let people believe that consuming oil and gas is going to be cheaper rather than renewables. And that's the proper quote. If you look at the conclusion of our RTE survey and the cost on the electricity investment. So you have here the cost of the electricity in France as of now, 40 billion per annum. And depending on the scenarios, in the future, you might have to invest between 60 and 80-ish billion euro per annum. So it's much more expensive. Okay, but in this scenario, a reminder that you do not consume any more coal, gas, or oil. The bill consumption for those 3 energy are going to be 0. So now let's compare to how much France is paying today for oil, gas, and coal. Oil, depending on annum, between 20 and 55 billion euro per annum, which will go to 0. Gas, between 10 and 20 billion euro per annum, which will go to 0. In comparison with last year, a completely decarbonized world, we will save 75 billion, 3 times more than this gap that we have here. The worst scenario in economical terms is the one we are following today. And it is also the worst for the environment. So that's the good news in some ways, which is that if we want to save the planet, we will save our wallet. That's the good news. If we don't do that, and we follow the current scenario, what is happening is that the cost of energy is too high, and the government, this is a case of what the last decision which has been taken by the French government over the last 6 years, is that they're offering energy rebate because people cannot pay for the energy. And if you look at just what has been decided over the last 2 months, between 20 and 24 billion, depending on the sources, between 20 and 24 billion rebate on energy for the final user, in comparison with the tax we get on gas oil, which is 30 billion. So we have a Minister of Finance which is taking 30 billion to give 30 billion in rebate. If you see a logic, you tell me. I don't see any logic. So we have got a problem here. And the problem is that the scenario we have is not economically acceptable for the final user, nor economically valid. And I think it should have been worth mentioning this in our RTE survey. Say, guys, we have good news. At least in all that, which is also challenges, we have a good news, which is that we have a scenario which is less expensive rather than the one we are following today. It is requiring a lot of investment, but it is globally less expensive. So that's the first good news, which I think is worth mentioning. Second stuff, which I think is mentioned, but not necessarily black and white, is nuclear. So we are talking about nuclear, possibility to get 3 scenarios for nuclear, blah, blah, blah. Okay. In the survey of RTE, you have got some sensibility analysis to see what would be the impact of different parameters. In particular, what would be the impact of the cost of financing. And of course, all the comparison are done on with the same cost of finance, which is roughly speaking 4%. For capital and debt. And if you look at the analysis, sensibility analysis, should we have a difference of 3% in the cost of the capital between renewable and nuclear, then nuclear becomes more expensive. Said differently, if you want to be able to build nuclear plant, you need to make sure that you can get access to cheap finance. And you have 2 parameters. First one, you need to be state-owned. Second one, nuclear need to be considered as a green electricity. Unless you have those 2 parameters, nuclear is not economically valid. It becomes more expensive. So that's one element which I think is worth understanding. I think there is no way in France that the French government can restart a nuclear. It would be the same in Belgium, unless it becomes a state-owned company for generation. And it is probably the way it's going to end up, with creation of dedicated special purpose vehicles, which will be created for one particular nuclear reactor, which will be state-owned, majority state-owned. And it's important because otherwise you are not competitive. Also a reminder that nuclear is severely potentially impacted in the future by global warming and the ability to cool the reactor in summer. And also the fact that if you are not state-owned, you cannot get civil insurance for civil damages, or you get civil insurance for renewable. So that's something it's important to understand. Nuclear might have a future for state-owned countries. So typically China, potentially France. But if you're not state-owned, you cannot restart nuclear. That's my perception. Then we are going to talk about balancing. So it's interesting. So there are different sort of balancing. You can balance a grid at 1 day and night difference. You can balance the grid at 1 week, and then you have the seasonal swing, the problem of managing the demand during winter or during summer. There are different elements. Something which is, I think, an interesting result, which is worth having in mind, is that for what's about the daily swing and the weekly swing, here you get the result in both RTE and ELIA survey. We don't have any problem. Daily swing and seasonal swing is not a problem. We have got plenty of way to make it. Demand side management, which has been mentioned just before. If we manage properly the demand with new system in order to pilot the consumption, you can manage potentially the daily swing easily. You can also use the vehicle to grid, potentially, and batteries, because the cost of batteries is going down progressively. And you can, in batteries, you can store for 1 day or even 1 week, potentially. So using batteries plus vehicle to grid plus DSM is the cheapest way to manage daily and weekly swing. And you can do that at a cost which is, in regards of the production of peak production using CCGT or gas turbine or whatever, it is 10 times cheaper if you can manage it at scale, which require to be able to have system in order to access those elements in millions, to be able to manage the data coming from those systems in millions, to be able to make the link between consumption and distribution companies using millions of data. So you need an infrastructure, but if you can effectively set up the infrastructure, you can manage daily and weekly swing easily. Problem is with seasonal swing. That's a more challenging issue that you might have potentially to manage in winter a consumption, whereas you might have less sun, and including in some cases several days without wind. So you need to have a storage. So how can you manage this? There is 3 ways to manage it, principally hydrogen and interconnectors. And that's one difference between ELIA survey and RTE survey, that in the case of ELIA survey, they expect that Belgium is not going to be able to have enough green production locally. So you will have to import some of your production, green production, and hence part of your interconnectors are going to be already used. So if you look at in relative terms, how much hydrogen turbine is expected or needs to be installed in the case of ELIA survey, by memory, it's 7 gigawatt, I think. Whereas in the case of RT survey, it is for 100% renewable scenarios, 20-something, 20-ish. So globally speaking, in relative terms, you have twice more hydrogen turbine required in Belgium rather than in France, which is due to the fact that your interconnectors are going to be already partially used for importing electricity, green electricity. We don't have this issue in France. So for this reason, we have relatively less hydrogen turbine required in case of 100% scenario. And in the case of the French scenario, the 3 scenarios which are using nuclear, we don't need nearly any hydrogen. So that's something also to have and understand. Hydrogen is associated to 100% renewable scenario. If you go towards scenarios where you have only 50 to 60% of renewable and the rest with nuclear, you don't need hydrogen. So that's something which is a decision to be taken potentially here in Belgium on whether you want to have part of your production with nuclear. If you get a third of your production with nuclear, you can get rid of hydrogen. You don't need it, nearly. Last point, which I think where I am discussing, challenging a bit the RTS survey, is the role of batteries. I do believe, I wrote in the past a lot of articles around the development of photovoltaics, stating that I thought we were largely underestimating the speed at which photovoltaic would be developed, and effectively it has been developed much faster than what I thought, including myself. I did the same for electric vehicle. I said, well, when electrical vehicle is going to be competitive, it's going to be developing much faster than what we think. And effectively, it has been the case. But also, my own estimate has been under-evaluated. And I'm going to redo exactly the same for lithium battery. The cost of lithium battery went down from $1,200 to $140 per kilowatt hour. It is slightly up for 3 months, plus 15% because of the lack of lithium. But long term, it's going to go down. And because of the price of the electricity going up, now, roughly speaking, you can store and destore 1 megawatt hour for 100 euro. You can produce 1 megawatt hour with photovoltaic for 40 euro, which means that in the current condition of the market, you can produce and store 1 megawatt hour for 140 euro, which is half of the market price. How can you stop this? It is unstoppable. So the market of the battery is going to increase steadily just because it is economically valid. And hence, when I read in the survey of RT that they expect, in the scenario with the 3 nuclear, they expect nearly no battery. And in the case of the 3 100% green production, they expect 20 gigawatt of battery. Don't believe in this. We'll get in France, whatever the scenario, I believe we get at least 50 gigawatt in 2050. And I'm sure I'm going to be wrong. It's going to be more than that. Sure. You cannot stop a technology which is becoming competitive. And it is the case. So that's my own estimate. You don't have this in any paper anywhere. Well, whatever. For what's about the battery market, whatever survey you can read, you can put it in the paper box immediately, because due to the evolution you have got on the wholesale market recently, and due to the Ukrainian crisis, whatsoever, all this, you can put it immediately in the paper box. You are dead, because all those surveys have been done when the market was at 50 euro per megawatt hour. The forecast has 3 years now, it's 240. So you can put all this in your bucket. And I did my own estimate, and it's my personal view, on what will be the market in France of the battery. Roughly speaking, 1/4 for self-consumption for industrial, 1/4 here for facilitating the EV, electrical vehicle charging station, for high-power electrical vehicle charging station, 1/4 here for facilitating the injection of renewable, wind park and photovoltaic park, including having the ability for some substation to get hybrid production, photovoltaic over wind park, on one particular substation, and using the battery as a temporary storage in order to facilitate the injection of photovoltaic. And then the rest is going to be for grid operators and for domestic self-consumption. That's my estimate, and I believe we'll get in France at least between 2 and 20 times what you have in the survey of RT. They are underestimating the role of a lithium battery. We have one mitigation, which I mentioned before, access to ore. That's it for this second slot. I hope it was interesting. And Cédric, I give you the floor again.
Thank you so much again, Francois, for sharing your very valuable insights. It's very interesting to see that the cost of our future energy system is going to be lower than the cost of our current energy system. So that's really refreshing, and really that's something that speak to my mind, to be honest. What the future might bring, one thing is sure: we're gonna need a lot of more batteries, a lot of more photovoltaic installations and EV charging stations getting plugged into our grid. This also means that the grid is our electric grid is gonna change substantially, and it also requires new solutions to manage all those electrical equipments. So therefore, we have invited 2 startups who have developed a solution for this. The first one, I would like to introduce you to Xavier Dejoie. He's the CEO of Omogen, and he founded his company in 2004. He's headquartered out of France, and they developed a solution that manages maintenance activities and field activities for electrical equipment to keep everything up and running. So please, come to the stage.
Thank you, Cédric. Well, yes, Xavier Dejoie, so I'm leading Omogen. Omogen is, as Cédric said, a software suite to handle your field operations and also manage all the assets on which these operations apply. To tell you in a few words how can Omogen, in the context of this transition, is going to make our lives better, probably our work also more efficient and our companies more profitable. Let me give you one view of this through the decarbonization effect. The decarbonization consequences, we are basically having 2 main phenomena. One is the diversification of the mix with more green, more local as well, as Francois mentioned. And the second, I think, before all, and most of all, the booming quantities of equipment we are going to have to manage. And this is a main challenge to consider in this equation. Here, all the points of the transport, of the distribution network are concerned. We are going to have a massive increase of number of points to manage. And this means that for operators which still have the same mission, they will still have the same mission to ensure service availability everywhere, anytime, but with millions of points to manage, with millions of points to install, provision properly, with millions of endpoints to supervise, and among these millions, to spot those who are faulty and then delegate on the field operations in a massive way to put them back into operation. So this is a real challenge, and this is new, except of course for smart meter, which is really the exception we have in the energy market. So this means that some of them have problems. And I think I'm not the only one who have read these headlines. I'm not probably the only one who have faced also these problems if you have an electrical vehicle. Before being an electric vehicle driver, I'm a software man. And the first question I'm asking myself when I see this kind of situation is, but what kind of system do they have to come out with this kind of situation? And if you take a snapshot today, actually, of the systems that are used today in the energy field, you come out somehow to this conclusion. Most of the system, the majority of systems today used are whether legacy or somehow, let's say, off the shelf, but still old. Which means, first, they are costly to develop, to maintain, and they show limits. Why? These systems are taking time to be mature. They're taking time to get your money back from what you invested in them. And the second main limit in this context of massive digitalization, they are not as open as we would like them to be. They are not giving this kind of plug and play. We all expect between these systems and the outer world, your own environment, of course, but further than this, to web services, to other software outside. We were mentioning with the, sorry for the, I forgot the name, but these guys with the data lake and all the AI behind. So this is key. I mean, all this value which is out there in the market, you need to bring it in and deliver it to your end customers. And this is where Omogen is making the difference. We have a package solution, meaning very quick to deploy, quick and fast return on investment. We have, and as I said here, digital by design solution, meaning we are kind of plug and play with all these things outside that allows you to really bring value in your company and to your customers. Today, as you can guess, Omogen is also facing this energy challenge with numbers. Here, I will take out from this slide a few figures, such as this 180,000 interventions per day. Size is not a problem for us. And we can duplicate, I mean, we are scalable, so we can duplicate this over and over without any problem. We have, it's not mentioned there, but we have 99.8% recorded service availability. So if you just consider, okay, I have millions of things to manage, which platform I can use? Omogen is there, no problem about that. And you can see that we also we have millions of IoT records per year managed. We have many millions also of assets managed. So no problem about handling millions. And I think you can guess that we also serve other sectors than energy. And here I'm opening a little bit the subject. We are serving people with what I call field operations-led activity, where field operation is really the main driver of their activity, up down here to guys with very asset-intensive led activity, where the assets are very costly and they have a very great burden on the P&L. So all across this chain, we go, of course, from just basic after-sales services to transport logistics, healthcare. I mean, people maintaining healthcare devices everywhere in hospitals and to your home. Going through, of course, industry, city, urban services, water treatment, facility management in real estate. So all these are today Omogen users. What value do we bring essentially to these people? 3 main pillars. First, we align Omogen with their business objective, with their business performance objective. We make sure that these guys get the features, the data brought to them and shared to their ecosystem. And these objectives could be whether, let's say, cost objective, TCO of my asset, SLA compliance, regulation compliance, cost of your interventions, any kind of business objective. So first thing we do with our customers is, okay, we sit down and say, okay, what are the key objectives you want to reach by using Omogen? Second pillar, making sure that your customers are more satisfied than they have been before. And this is actually thanks to lots of features we have developed within Omogen. First, making sure that you interact much more easier in a very, I would say, multi-channel way with your customers. Very interactive, very also supportive to your customers, and giving them transparency, giving them visibility on how you treat their request, how you manage their network or their infrastructure, if you do. And this is the second main value we're bringing. And third, last but not least, we empower your team, not just giving out a new software among many, but as I said earlier, giving them the features, the data, and I would say improving their well-being at work, giving more comfort, giving more ease to them. And this is a key thing for us. And you see on the right-hand side here, the gains, real gains. These are the figures reported to us by our end customers after more or less 3 years and a half of use of Omogen. And some of them are big. Sorry. So, as conclusion, why they've chosen Omogen? So I will not, I would say, go into details, but basically, first, scale is not a problem for us. We can handle many operations, many assets, and keep performance there. Very reliable software solution. Second, we are very open. We are plug and play with many operations, many applications, many software, many IoTs and so on out there. And third, we are having a software approach, a software editor approach, meaning package. Time to market is very fast. User adoption is very fast. ROE is consequently very fast. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks so much, Xavier. You can give it to my colleagues. Great. Before we head into the well-deserved break, we got one more startup pitch lined up for you. Today we have Paul Mignot here. Paul is the founder of withthegrid, and withthegrid has developed an asset monitoring application that enables owners and operators to digitize their operations. The company is founded in 2016 and is headquartered out of Utrecht. And thanks so much, Paul, for being here today, although it's a public holiday in the Netherlands. We're very happy to have you here.
No problem. Always happy to come to Vlaanderen. Good afternoon. I would like to start with a picture of a primary school. And this is a primary school of the son of my co-founder. And they were moving into a new building. And they had to postpone that by 3/4 of a year because there was no connection available to the grid. The heat pumps required more electricity than they currently had. And they needed to install a new substation. And that took time. There were no people, there was no equipment. Basically, they had to postpone this. And this is the new reality that we're facing. And at With the Grid, what we're trying to do is unlock flexibility to solve grid congestion. Grid congestion is one of the effects of the energy transition that we're in right now. And it comes together with all other problems. Not just a congested grid, but also a shortage of technical personnel. But that's in many other sectors. At one leading DSO in the Netherlands, for example, the yearly rate of people reaching their pension age is around 2 to 3%, and that will increase now to 5 to 6%. And together with that, aging infrastructure, the electricity grid is majority built in the last century, mid-last century. So there will be, in addition to expansion, we'll have more replacements that are needed. And this leads to the following picture. This is a map of the Netherlands in red, orange, and yellow. And this shows where there is congestion problems, where there is no new connections possible for solar projects or for wind projects, or where companies cannot upgrade their connections. And these are the headlines that we're now getting. Primary school can't rebuild. First businesses cancel their expansion plans. Only in 2026 do we have new capacity. This is why solar panels are stop working. Amsterdam, a city of nearly 1 million, needing 1,000 new transformers to be built to be able to deal with the new system. And unfortunately, it won't only be a problem with the Netherlands. Right now, the Netherlands has the most amount of solar per capita. But if we look at the projections of how much solar will be installed, it will go ×2 to ×5 or ×6 by 2030. Then it means that we will have these problems in other countries as well. So we need to solve them, and fast, because otherwise we will have a lot more red spots in Europe. How can we approach that? Well, there's basically, they can be categorized in 3 parts. One is build, build, build. Build more grid capacity. The second part is using electricity that is generated in a smarter way and using the grids in a smarter way. So that means utilizing the capacity that we have much more efficiently. And the third part is to create a framework to speed up number 1 and 2. And with the grid, we're focusing on number 2 with 2 solutions. And what we do there is that we combine energy hardware with software. First, to identify where is the grid capacity. As you can imagine, not at all times is every substation or every transformer at max capacity. This varies throughout the day and varies throughout the year. The way contracts are now realized, the majority is, okay, you have a fixed amount of capacity. But if you monitor that in real time, you can then say, okay, let's see where there is more space. If we then know, hey, these are the areas where we definitely have no more space, let's focus our scarce resources of more capacity there. And the other ones, let's look at smart solutions. So transitioning from a system where the grid operator does not have an insight into what is happening on the lower voltage grid, but has a real-time insight, that will give them the ability to prioritize their investments and lower their total investment costs. And what you can then do is, this is a live view of the application, is not just look at a specific area or a specific substation and see, hey, do we have any issues there in terms of power quality? So that is where solar panels shut off because there's too much. But we can also identify, do we have any congestion? Is there something that we need to do? Now that's of course step one. Now we know exactly where something is wrong, where we need to focus on. What can we do? Of course, we can interact with the consumers on the consumption side. That was already mentioned in the previous presentations. But what we focus on is on the production side. And there we enable active control, for example, for solar panels, to switch them off when there is too much power and there is insufficient demand for that. In the previous presentation of Francois, it was mentioned that load shedding is part of the solution. And that is one approach. Here there is a solar roof, 4,000 panels, and there, connected with a teleport, you can identify, you can set a command of curtailing this solar solution. What's the benefit? Well, it actually is a revenue increase for the solar power producers because there is a market when there is no demand to turn off your assets. And in addition, you increase your grid capacity because you can you have more control over these assets. So in the Netherlands, from next year onward, it will be obliged for the grid operator to turn off, to have this emergency button at solar plants. And that means that you can then, well, basically remotely say, okay, I want to curtail a solar plant because my forecast says that there is congestion or I have congestion right now. Now we need to implement this, of course, into the system that we are currently in, which is the incumbents, the grid operators, the large energy providers. And there's three aspects that we need to take into account. Cybersecurity is definitely the number one attention. And the situation in Ukraine highlights even more the risk of not being in control of your own systems. So that's something that in any solution needs to be taken care of. Second part is that there's already IT systems running there. So how do we integrate that? A greenfield approach is always the most optimal, but how do we integrate? How do we roll it out over the large asset base that they have or the large IT system that they have? And the third part is traditional way of working. So what you saw on the previous slide was a manual curtailment. So there's an operator telling it to turn off. Of course, we will go to automated curtailment, but it's a phased process. And you need to be able to adapt to the current way of working and give the operators the confidence, hey, I can do this manually, and then later on it will go automatically. We're a team of 18. We started in 2017 at an Intel hackathon, and now we work daily on these smart grid solutions. We have customers around Europe, predominantly in the Netherlands, grid operators as well as energy producers. And we look forward to engaging with you and seeing how we can further smarten the grid. Thanks a lot.
Welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the break and have some refreshing coffee. And I hope that you're still with us because we got some interesting keynotes still lined up for you and also some startup pitches. So yeah, I suggest that we dive right in. So I would once again invite Francois back on stage. He's going to elaborate a bit more on how digital solutions can break down the wall of reaching carbon neutral electricity or a carbon neutral energy system.
Thank you, Loic. So that's the last album of Pink Floyd, The Wall. So you see, we have got the chronology of Pink Floyd, with the animals, the dark side on the moon, and finally The Wall, the last one. So that's the last one, a modern one. So as you know, DXC Technology is a digital company. So we are going to here discuss and give you an helicopter view on where we believe digital can help the energy transition, but very high level vision of where we believe we can help. So the first area where I think digital can help in the future is modeling. We will have much more needs for modeling scenarios and be able to understand what if this is happening. What if suddenly a gas producer decides that he's not going to fuel anymore our market? What if? What do we do? What are the alternatives? And this needs to be done in a very short period of time. You have got weeks in order to understand, what if we don't get gas? But you can have also what if scenario. What if a decision is taken that we'll get out of ENU ETS and that we'll have a new scheme in order to fix and decide for the price of carbon? What if? What does it mean for me in terms of owner of grid asset, in terms of owner of generation asset? That's important. And today, clearly, I think utilities are under-equipped to perform what-if scenarios. And there is so many uncertainty, political uncertainty, technological uncertainty today on the market that unless you get what-if scenarios, you cannot really, I think, manage properly your business. So that's one. Second thing which I mentioned is that global warming is going to impact severely us, and it's going to impact our asset, it's going to impact our environment, it's going to impact the consumption pattern, our customers, it's going to impact the population, where people are going to be and where they're going to live, potentially. And again, if you are unable to be able to manage those elements and estimate those elements, you just cannot manage your business. And in terms of global warming impact, nothing is linear. I'm going to give you just one example with, again, big generation units. If you think in terms of increase of temperature, so we are set to be above 1.5% probably before 2030, last estimate of Météo France. We will reach certainly 2.5%, unfortunately, whereas we should not. But unfortunately, we'll probably reach 2.5%. So it's 1 degree difference. Well, you say, well, 1 degree. What is 1 degree? Is it important? In terms of river flow, to give you an estimation, going to 2.5 degree means that in the two of the main rivers of France, which is Garonne and La Loire, the volume of flow of the rivers will be reduced by a half in summer, 50%. It's not linear. Just 1 degree, you reduce by a half the flow of the river. And nuclear plants above 28 degrees are obliged to stop the production. So the number of days that a nuclear plant is going to be obliged to stop the production is going to be probably between 10% of the days. And it's going to happen in summer when you will have an important increase of the consumption. So things are not linear. So you need to be able to model this. Something which I think has been mentioned by you, with the grids, grid investment. Today, effectively, the logic that grid operators, whether they're distribution operators or transportation operators, for 60 years, when you have an increase of the demand, you increase the grid capacity. It has been the habits for 60 years, nearly. And I would say, fortunately for us, we have now alternatives. We have the ability to potentially invest in storage capacity, or to avoid the reinforcement in the grid, or to postpone it, to save time, and say, well, I'm going to reinforce the grid, but if I can save 5 years or 10 years, I will do the reinforcement only in 10 years, and we do a bigger reinforcement so that the global investment is going to be optimized. So that's one example. You can also invest in DSM, demand side management, or peak shaving system in order to avoid, again, the investment to be done or to postpone the investment. You will also have to model in the future whether you can potentially deliver temporary contract, which is usually not the case in most of the distribution rules today. When you are connected to a grid, you contract for, let's say, a 9 kilowatt contract, a grid operator is obliged to ensure that you always get the ability to get out of the grid 9 kilowatt. A contract would state, well, I can potentially 10 days or 20 days per annum not deliver any energy to you. A temporary contract is something which is not on the market in most cases. This is something which will happen in the future. Or to get electricity out of the grid, or to inject electricity. We can imagine that a solar plant owner will be able to inject on the grid, apart from, because there is too much electricity, some hours or some days in the year. That's typically the sort of modeling that would avoid to reject some demand of connection and still allow a promoter of photovoltaic to be able to project and finance his project. So that's all that sort of modeling capacity, which I think are today to be developed in most of cases, both on the trading side and distribution side and generation side. Second part of where I think digital can help, where we think digital can help, is in control command system. So clearly the control command today, as it is today, is principally based on controlling the grid, not necessarily devices or systems which are behind the grid. And it has been mentioned, and we discuss it, that we have, with demand-side management, the ability to better shape the demand, so to be able to manage the constraints of the grid. And this is cheaper rather than buying big turbine. And thus we have whatsoever to switch all the gas big turbine to hydrogen big turbine, the less we can invest in those very expensive systems, the better it is. It is less expensive to shape the demand by controlling effectively all the devices which are at home, which you can control. Like heating pump, like fridge, like heating system, like potentially including photovoltaic panels that you can switch off when you have too much electricity, like a vehicle to grid, or including just charging station in order to adapt the system. If you want to do that at scale, you need to get some harmonization on how you are going to do that. I personally have some doubts on the system that you see happening and sold on some markets as of now, which is stating that this is a final user which will fine-tune his equipment and the consumption of his equipment in order to take into consideration, well, I don't know exactly what he's taking into consideration, because whatsoever, the price of the real-time price of the market, he doesn't know about it. So, well, in some cases, like Spain, for example, you have on a daily basis on the newspaper how much is going to be the cost of the electricity, but I don't believe in this system. I don't believe that our customers are clever, smart, and interested enough in electricity in order to fine-tune their consumption based on what the distribution operators will need. Don't believe it. But what they can do is effectively tell you what they would be keen to accept in terms of demand-side management capacity. What they can do is, yes, I am okay for you to temporarily, for 10 minutes or 15 minutes, switch off my fridge. I have no problem with that. If you want to reduce the power of my EV charging station by 1 or 2 kilowatt, I have no issue with that. You can do that. And what is going to happen in the future, I think, is much more a system which will allow the final user to decide what is the amount of flexibility he is offering to the retailer, so that the retailer can fix the price at which he will deliver this energy based on this profile. And then these are robots which are going to manage robots. You will get robots on the distribution side, which are going to talk to robots on the retail side, which are going to talk and then control your devices. All this is going to be automated. Including, we could believe in the future that the price of electricity will be time-based. You could have potentially a retailer in the morning, another one in the afternoon. And all that can be automated. But all that is going to end up with robots selling to robots. That's a way to give and smartify the demand side management while getting the system simple for the final user. Here, Digitaal has an interesting role to play. You will have, in terms of grid balancing, my perception, my conviction, even though my conviction, is that whereas today the system services in nearly all the European countries are country-based, or in case of Germany, you have different system operators, but globally speaking, you have one system operator to balance the whole of the grid per country. That's more or less the system as of now. I think because of the amount of renewable energy we'll have, progressively we'll go to nodal distribution of the system services. So we'll have several nodes on a particular country to deliver system services, and you will have potentially a price of the balancing of the system per zone, which means that you will have much more distribution on the way you balance the system. Also, it needs to be considered that whereas today the system is pyramidal, you go from the bottom, the top of the pyramid to the bottom. So if you look at, for example, reactive power, the reactive power are produced by large plant, sold to the transportation, which is delivering reactive power, but potentially to distribution operators where they need it. The system could reverse in the future, modifying the parameters of an inverter, the PV inverters. You can inject reactive power on a distribution grid. And we could imagine in the future that the distribution operators are going to deliver reactive power to the transporter, the other way around. So the balancing of the grid is certainly going to evolve, and I'm sure Digitaal is going to play a role in the development of nodal distribution of the grid system services. Sorry. Last point is around enlarging the community. Again, if you look at the electricity market and the players which are today on the electricity market, there has been nearly no evolution for 50 years. Say 50 years because over the last decades, you start to see new players arriving. But nearly for 50 years, there was no new players. In 1998, a decision of European Commission to split the market in different parts, still a limited number of new players finally. You just split the older player in different parts, but you have got the same players. This is going to change for different reasons. First one is that the nearly 20% of the consumption of electricity progressively will go to mobility, and in particular electrical vehicle. And who is going to deliver the energy to those electrical vehicles? Is it going to be electricity companies, or is it going to be oil company? Well, if you look at the amount of acquisitions that Shell, Total, BP, and they are doing in order to penetrate the market, it is very clear that they have in mind that the electricity of cars are going to be delivered by them, not by electricity operator. And by the way, if they start to sell electricity to car owners, they will probably say, well, why don't we sell the electricity directly to the homeowners? And they will expand. So the oil producer, and including potentially the car manufacturers, are going to penetrate the electricity market. That's the first change in the environment, which Digitaal will help, in fact, because Digitaal is going to have the development of the platform in order for the driver of the electrical vehicle to be able to book potentially an EV charging station, to pay for the EV charging station, to be able to calculate or even to transfer the energy that you are purchasing for an EV loading station to your own home bill, etc., etc. All that needs digital. So you will have a significant amount of exchange of information between the EV owners and the electricity buyers, and all this is going to evolve severely in the coming days. The second area where you have an evolution and an enlargement of the community is multigrid, what we name multigrid, which is that if we want to avoid to invest too much in balancing the electrical grids, a way to make it is also to be and to take into consideration the fact that you can balance an energy against another one. So potentially you have other grid, which is the methane, so the gas grid operator. You have also those guys who are managing cold water networks or heating networks, and potentially in the future, including those guys who are going to manage H2 hydrogen networks. And you can balance. You can potentially say, well, guys, I have too much electricity. I can transform it in methane or in hydrogen. Can you inject this into it? You can do that, but you need to know about what is effectively the position of your counterparty. Do you have enough space in the hydrogen network to make it? Do you have enough space potentially in the heating network to increase the temperature and use the extra energy you would have, etc., etc. So you will have a need for an exchange of information between grid owners in order for them to facilitate the transfer of energy from one grid to another one. Seems something that is nearly not existing today. I have designed the functioning of a green county in the region of Nice, near from Nice, and in this area, I stated that it would be interesting to have a multi-grid network operators. So network operators over the network operators in order to facilitate the exchange of information and to help the balancing between different grids. So that's a concept which is more than a proof of concept because it's working, it's live in Nice. But I think this is direction that we could expand potentially in the future for complete countries. Two last direction where I think we will expand. First one is arrival of new players, in particular players in the storage area, people who are going to deliver virtual storage services. Rather than final user buying his own batteries, he's going to buy the battery for different owners, and he's going to give you access to this battery in order to store your energy and get back your energy from the batteries. You'll have a subscription paid for this service, but then he will manage your battery for you. So that's something which is going to include new players. Demand-side managers and people who are delivering peak shaving services is also new players. And finally, the fact that effectively in the future, and it's already the case, for example, in France, what you can do potentially, if you have different consumption sites connected to the same transformer, you can aggregate the consumption of those sites. And if you have also production, you can aggregate this production to the consumption and make the sum of all your point of delivery for one particular transformer. And that's the beginning of local exchange of block of energy from one player to others. So you have community of energy, which between final prosumers, which is going to enlarge the community. And the fact that you have got some financial sites, which will allow you, including to invest your money in generation capacity or storage capacity. So all this makes that you will have an enlargement of the community. Unless you get digital technology to do that, it will not happen easily. So that's, I think, where all guys, we have a role to play. And I'm happy to see that all the presentation, by the way, that we had today is fitting quite well with, with this global helicopter view. Thank you very much. Cedric, I give back the floor to you.
Thank you so much, Francois, for sharing your valuable insights today with us. As Francois also already mentioned, it's not only the physical electricity grid that is going to change, but it's also the dynamics between the energy consumer and producer that is going to change. A company that recognized this early on is Eliq. And please give a warm applause for Joost van der Linde. Joost is business development manager for Eliq in the Benelux area. And Eliq is a company founded in 2015 and out of Sweden. And I'll let you do the rest of the presentation. Thanks, Joost.
Thank you, Cedric. Yeah, my name is Joost van der Linde. Eliq, well, Eliq was founded already 5 years before, but we did something else before 2016. So let's move on. Eliq is a company from Sweden, Gothenburg-based, and we help energy providers, typically energy suppliers, in engaging better with their customers. And we do that what we call actionable energy insights. A brief introduction, but brief introduction is also partly, let's say, repeating what Francois also has already mentioned. The energy transition is here. We all know that. There's a lot of activity and a lot of business and a lot of money involved there. And we see that typically energy companies, utility companies already act on that. And the way they act on that is that from only delivering power and gas, they deliver more services, more products. They introduce PV, they introduce EV charging and the like. That's what we see happening. And the impression, of course, is that that is helping, indeed, the energy transition. What we see is that the energy customer sees things a bit different. They see what the energy provider is doing, but they do not recognize that energy provider as their partner of choice to get the let's say, advice of being more green and ask energy tech. They see their energy provider mainly for one thing, the bringer of the bill. Once a year, 8 minutes of attention, and that's it. That's not the party that you want to be talking to. And we see, what we also see, that this is getting effects more and more in the same position. So the only 8 minutes a year attention, mostly negative. The bill is too high usually, with the higher and more volatile prices that we currently see. So there's something that needs to be done there. And we think there is a solution. And the solution, Francois, in his last presentation already mentioned it, digital products, digital solutions, helping end customers becoming more sustainable, more energy efficient. And we strongly believe in that. And not only we believe in it, we practice it. This is everything that I'm showing you today is available today out of the box. The three things very, very important in everything. It has to be personalized. So not everybody should get the same information. It has to be personalized on your personal situation. Friction-free. We all know Netflix, Amazon, the like. If you want to buy something, if you want to change something, you want to have it directly. You don't need to be bothered by any procedure whatsoever. It needs to be friction-free. And value adding, of course. You don't have to explain that, I think, because value adding meaning you have to benefit from it. And if you benefit from it, then you're likely to take action. Then there's three steps in a typical customer journey that we see. First of all, if you want to make people change, because it's about changing behavior, if you want to change things, I think that was in the first presentation of Francois, is create awareness. Customers must get aware, must be aware what's actually happening. Not just about the bill that they get. We can present that in an app, and that looks nice, but it doesn't help actually. What will help, for instance, is what we call disaggregation, showing customers where their energy that they buy, that they have bought, actually went. Not where it went, but also where it's likely to go. Not just looking back based on smart meter data, but also looking forward, forecasting where the energy is likely to be used. Because if you present that to your customers, then the customer is more aware and should know where he is, where he can go. Second step in that is once the customer is aware, we can advise and notify the customer. We can advise him, for instance, when we see that he uses a lot of energy during daytime, maybe it's a good idea to buy solar panels. sounds like a no-brainer, but it isn't. Something else, if something happens, if something is different from the previous period, we can notify customers, dear customer, please be aware, we noticed that last week, last month, something has changed in your behavior. Maybe you should act, maybe you should have a look, maybe you should change something, because if you want to avoid a bill shock and you see that your consumption is much higher than what is covered in your monthly payment, you can still act on that. And if you do that on the bill, then you're too late. If you do it up front, you can do that. So take action. Third step is, of course, the benefit, the actual benefits. So if a customer is able to change his behavior based on what we've shown, the awareness, the advice that we gave, they can benefit themselves by saving costs or saving consumption. Or if they bought additional services, a smart thermostat to make sure that the temperature in the house is lowered to avoid additional use of energy when they're not at home. PV panels to cover part of their consumption. That's the second. That's the third step. So the getting from awareness to advice, to take action, and then actually benefit directly, either via buying additional services. So this looks like theory. Like I said, this is something that we have working, and it is working. These are some figures that show that it is working for the customers. So we see 62% of customers really consult our services, whether there's an app or not. We'll come back to that later. Before they do any energy-related purchase. We see that customers have the feeling, the feeling that they have saved money. So they think they have done something in which they saved. It's always difficult for customers to determine if they really saved, but at least they have the feeling because they took some action. And that is not just a feeling. We've measured that as well, is that we measured that almost 7% is actually saved by customers that use our platform. Sorry, getting some signs from behind. So that's the way it works, how it works for customers. Does it work for the energy provider? Because everybody needs to gain from this. Yes, it does. What we see is that more than 30% of customers really get in change once an energy provider offers their customers the platform that we have. That means engagement means a customer becomes a user. Right? That's 30%. So that's not just the energy geeks, as we call it. It's 30% is substantial. 10 times more customer engagement. That means not just the 8 minutes a year when you get the energy invoice, but almost 7 minutes a month that people look at your app or at your portal, whatever, how we use the data. Customers are more engaged, and as a result, churn, so the intention of customers leaving, is much lower, up to 70% or factor 3. So there's a gain for everybody. That's the message here. How do we do that? First of all, how it works, there's a big button in the top right corner, left corner, if you look at it. No additional hardware. We believe that things have to be friction-free. That means we believe, especially currently, I'm talking about now, not what Francois was mentioning in future when things need to be automated, we definitely need other stuff. That's the next step. Now to engage customers, We want to avoid having to sell, having to install specific hardware in homes because that's difficult. It doesn't work. Communication is quite difficult. But there is a smart meter in a lot of cases. Belgium is rolling out. France has rolled out. The Netherlands has rolled out. Things in Scandinavia are rolled out. Germany is probably starting. So this is happening in Europe, and that data is already available. Everything that I showed, even the disaggregation, we do on smart meter data. Forecast, we do on smart meter data. Disaggregation as well. And we do that by acquiring metering data, acquiring third-party data, so weather data, energy price data, and potentially even data from connected EVs, from solar panels or smart thermostats, and potentially even energy providers, MDM or customer care and billing solutions to include self-service. Because if you have a platform that you are engaged with your customer with, why not include self-service? All the data we combine by using machine learning technologies, artificial intelligence, statistical models, and we make it available in 3 ways. First of all, via APIs. That means an energy provider can use the insights that we have produced using our methodology, using our models in their own systems, in their own apps, in their own portals. One step further than this, if you want to do it easier, we're able to provide you with web components that are easier to include in your own portals, in your apps. 3 lines of codes, I'm told by our developers. I'm not a developer, but and if you want to have really easy, out of the box, we do have a white label app. And those are the pictures that I have shown, but everything shown in the app is available via the API as well. We use our own API to produce our own views in the app. This is not something we do for the first time. Eliq already exists since 2016 with this solution. We have about 25 active customers that are using our service, either API, either web components, either app, millions of end users. There's some TBAs shortly to be announced, also in Belgium. And well, we're actively in Western Europe and expanding currently. Last slide on who Eliq is. Gothenburg-based. We have an office in UK, London, and in Lithuania, Vilnius, with 52 employees from a lot of countries, and we're Series A funded. And, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Joost, for sharing your solutions. With that, we have reached our last startup talk of today. I would like to introduce you to Irman. Irman is a very familiar face among the Plug and Play family. The company he founded is called Bleenco. He was founded in 2017, and he's based out of Munich. Yeah, Irman, please come to the stage. Sorry.
All right, just checking. So thanks everyone. My name is Irman. I'm a founder and the CEO at Bleenco, and I'm here today to tell you and explain you how can you use our platform as a go-to place to get your AI solutions for operations and to generate more money. Before we continue, I'd like to just mention one small detail. It's interesting, just today, 5 years ago, we started working with Plug and Play for the first time. So it's been 5 years. And I must say that these events today, like today with DXC and Plug and Play, they're always really interesting and really good. So I'd like to invite you maybe to just give them a clap for organizing it. All right, so let's move on with our presentation. So now you'd like to build an AI application. So whether you build it yourself or you want to purchase it from someone else, these are the 3 basic problems you have to overcome. So the first one is that there aren't many experts in AI. So if you want to build it, you have to get people and then you have to deliver. It turns out that there's only one AI expert per 3,000 companies in the world, just to give you an idea of how difficult that problem really is. Well, the second one is that if you want to build it internally, internal R&D is really slow. So it's about 4 to 5 years based on industrial benchmarks. And the last one, if you lose a lot of money and time, you're going to lose confidence. And I think this is not good. To overcome that we built Bleenco Go. Bleenco Go provides encapsulated AI features or functionality, which you can use as building blocks for your solutions. So you can drag and drop components of AI, connect them, and by connecting them in a certain way, you're basically telling our system, this is how I want you to treat my data. This is how I want you to process this data stream. And an interesting thing is, there's a huge selection of building blocks that already exist. They're tested and verified in various industrial applications. And the other thing is, these are real-time applications. So the penalty for having these components and encapsulated AI is close to zero. And that's our platform. What you would normally do, you would look for a component. Once you find it, you would drag and drop that component to the workspace. And then you would connect it with the rest of components in a certain way. And in case that something's wrong with your solution, let's say one of the component is missing something like image classifier over there, you'll have this triangle telling you there's something wrong. In this case, a model was missing, so we'll go back and just replace it by drag and dropping and hovering over the component. If connection is a problem, we let you know so you can fix it on the fly. And once your solution is being built, in this case, that's detection of safety equipment of workers. Then once it's built, you can inspect it and run it in real time in your browser. And it doesn't require any special knowledge. So in this case, we're going to see that the guy doesn't have a mask, so we'll let him know via a real-time alert that he doesn't have it. The other thing which you'll figure out is a big problem is once you have a lot of sensors and devices that you'd like to connect into your system and process that data. In this case, we have 2 cameras, as you can see at the input. So all you have to do here is you have to configure these cameras and set up parameters like what's the camera name, credentials, and so on. And then you can do fancy things like this. You can just drag and drop the connection and switch easily. And I think that's something that not a lot of platforms can claim can do on the fly. So this all happens on the fly in real time while you're just testing it and experimenting and prototyping. To summarize the 2 basic functionalities we offer. So one is, if you have your internal R&D capabilities, you can use our platform to build internal tools and products. You can build new services for your customer and generate money. That's the first promise. And the second, we have tens of solutions that are already ready to be used. These solutions you can just literally take off the shelf and plug them in. And as you can see, these are solutions that were built with small components, which we figured out with other customers that these are really high value solutions that they need. And you can take them off the shelf and then customize them yourself or in collaboration with us and launch them right away. What we see here are a few, I just took out a couple of solutions that we built so far. So these are all solutions that are either deployed already in production or in the last piloting phases. What you see on the left-hand side is a grid network. And here we are reading from sensors of that network. That's, by the way, that's one of the sites. So it's an industrial site. And the idea there is we want to read out values, and we want to know what's the voltage needed in upcoming maybe seconds or even longer periods. And color represents just that voltage usage that we predict. And then what you can do, there's something called active filters. And these active filters can be configured to handle that situation for your network. And the problem today is that it takes so much time to do that because it's manual. So you need experts to go there to inspect, to measure things, and go back and configure these switches and filters. And that takes a lot of time. You can't do it in real time. And therefore, this solution is really cutting time by it's some magical number. The other thing in the corner on the right side, I know it's small, so I'll try to explain. This is a bridge of a ro-ro ship in port. So one of the ports in the US. So for what we do there, we track cargo and we track flow of cargo, first coming on and off the ship. Second, we can track that cargo to determine the speed. You can do anything from onloading, offloading speed to driving behavior, monitoring if someone's speeding up and damaging infrastructure. The next one, I took with my smartphone. I couldn't get approval from a client to share the original video, but you can see that you don't need any fancy equipment. So I can take my smartphone out and show you how I can detect the leakage and wetness on the floor. So this is being extremely useful for places where you have dangerous goods, liquids, something that can spill over, cause environmental damage and infrastructure damage. So the question really is, what's your high-value use case? Because for us, it doesn't really matter. There's things you can get right away. There are things you can build yourself. And finally, to wrap it up here, when you use our product, it's obviously it's a really high-value product. It's something you can get a lot of value from. But also, what's important, you're getting access to our team. And it was really tough to recruit our team. We brought people from all over the world to Munich, to Germany, and Europe. And yeah, these are some of the really smart guys that work with us. So now I'm going to do something that not a lot of speakers does. So you can take out your phone and add me on LinkedIn. Right, or you can send me an email and say hi. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Irman, and thanks for the nice words as well. As you might have noticed, as a red thread through all the presentations and keynotes today, is that data is crucial, especially when you want to build like new digital products. Therefore, we invited one more special guest today. His name is Raf Boyle, and he's working as an information architect at the recently established Flemish data utility company. So please give a round of applause for Raf.
So Cedric, thank you for your kind introduction, and DXC, thank you for the invitation. Today, I've seen some compelling testimonials, as well as some practical insights towards the transition towards zero carbon emission future. Also have seen some stunning startups who made the shift from doing digital to being digital. This is a strategy that, as a Flemish government, we embrace. Now, in the past, Flanders was in the lead of, and still today, of clean tech, biotech, and health tech. Now, today, we are investing in data tech. We would like to be in the lead in Flanders on data tech and lower the barriers for stunning companies like you to easily participate in the data economy. Therefore, we are investing in data utilities. Now, for many decades, governments have been investing in utilities such as gas and electricity, and even millennia in water. There we've seen that the old Rome was able to build a sustainable society because of good utilities. They managed to grow to a city of 1 million inhabitants, where cities like London and cities like Firenze, it took them to the 19th century because they didn't have those utilities who are the fundamentals of a sustainable society. Now we see that we still have many hurdles where data is not yet flowing. Because we all know if data starts to flow, there will be more data and more opportunities for innovation. The data utility company will focus on building blocks, open building blocks, as well as new legislation so that data can flow between public and private sector and within the private sector. And also to help to set up ecosystems, also to help companies to participate in the data economy. One of the first building blocks is about personal data. What we see today is that a lot of the data is controlled by companies, by tech giants. Now, that's not only a problem that for the citizen or for the user on a level of the privacy, but we also have an innovation problem because the data is locked in those silos. It's not portable for me, and I cannot share it with stunning initiatives like one of the startups, Eliq. If I would be able to share my data, IoT data, data of smart meters, with such initiatives, they can build personalized, hyper-personalized services for me, and those initiatives also stimulate the data economy. Therefore, we are shifting from data controlled by a company to data controlled by the individual. This is a global course correction, so we have been working together with Sir Tim Berners-Lee. Sir Tim invented the World Wide Web over 30 years ago, and we can't imagine living without the web because it's also a building block for our economy. Now Sir Tim wants a course correction where we as a user become in control of our data again. So I will use an example of a diploma because we all know a diploma, but in your head, please think about examples of your sector. Think about the example of Eliq. Now, for instance, with a diploma, if I'm applying for a new job and I would like to share my diploma, either I have to share all my data on a PDF or a piece of paper, and I share it forever. Now we're focusing on a new concept, solid. By the end of this year, each citizen in Flanders will have a personal data vault. Look at this as an online memory stick, which contains structured data that I can share. For instance, my diploma. Not all the data, but maybe only the fact that I have a master's degree, and only for the period I want to share it. In this way, companies and stunning startups, as we've seen today, don't have to focus on gathering the data, but users can share it and get benefits out of it. The second high-impact project is the Flemish data space. We've seen examples today about the grids, about data, fast-moving sensor data, high velocity, high volume. But it's not about big data, it's about smart data that we need to be able to link across sectors. For instance, if I look around me, I see there will be a couple of thousand of sensors. If they register something each second, which is not a lot, then in 1 year it will be 126 billion transactions, which is more than all transactions in a year in the European Commission, in Europe. Now, there are some challenges in working with this amounts of data and also within the context of grids. If you would like to query this data, this amount of data on a web scale, so on the scale of a region or a country, then you need robust building blocks. Therefore, Flemish government is investing together with companies active in Flanders in those building blocks, which will help publishers to publish their data in a sustainable way, and with reusers, the use cases that we've seen today, to easily consume that amount of data. This is one of the projects of the Flemish Resilience Initiative, one of the projects where also the DXC is involved as a partner. Now, with the Flemish data utility company, we will focus on lowering technical borders in order to let data become plug and play. Second, we will focus on the legislation, because today we have a lot of barriers where it's very hard to let data flow. And the third initiative is about the ecosystem. Today we already started up several ecosystems, public, private, where we are co-creating on business cases, on making it sustainable by creating a sustainable business model. And we're truly convinced that because of those actions helping the companies who are active in Flanders, that we will not only cope with the societal challenges in Flanders, but we will create a network of companies that will be winning tenders across Europe and beyond. This strategy is a part of the Flemish Resilience Program, where we are investing 4.3 billion in each citizen and entrepreneur. We're looking forward to collaborate with you in an energy ecosystem, and I'm looking forward to talk to you on the reception. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Raf. So that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed the content as much as we did. I hope you appreciated the keynote speakers and the startup pitches. And we'd love to see you again.
Yes, but this is only a starting point. We want to continue discussion with all of you. We will have the opportunity to have it with some drinks just after the session. But of course, you can also reach out to any of the DXC colleagues in your network. We can help you get into contact with startups, depending on the challenge that you have, to further move on in that discussion, to explore new ways of doing things, to also help you, or from a cultural point of view, move minds in your company. So before moving to the drinks and the funny part, I would like to thank a number of parties. First of all the startups for coming over today and having these speeches. It looks easy, but it took quite some hours to get this prepared, to get this lined up for you in a smooth way. Thank you, of course, all the people in the audience, but also thank you to the PNP team for helping us organizing this. And thank you to the many DXC colleagues, of course, for helping in front of or behind the scene. Thank you. And a warm applause, I would say, for everyone.
And of course, on behalf of Plug and Play, we also like to thank everyone who was involved today, the speakers, startups, the people from the video team as well. And yeah, I would like to invite you all right now to the networking part for the people that joined in person, of course. And yeah, let's have some drinks, let's have some chats, and see you soon. Thank you.